Nothing breeds insomnia quite like a wife on her fourth late project of the week. That, or the gas station coffee I'd been mainlining since Tuesday. I stood in our cramped kitchen at 11:30 p.m., watching the fridge light flicker like a fading neon sign, when Nola's second phone started buzzing on the granite countertop we'd spent 3 months arguing over. The message preview lit up the screen. You up? E. Porter Kellor, supply chain consultant, 36 years old, and apparently married to a woman who needed 2 phones to manage her recruiting projects. I'd always prided myself on being observant. It's what made me good at tracking shipments and identifying bottlenecks in corporate logistics. But somehow, I'd missed the biggest red flag waving right under my nose. The front door clicked open, followed by the familiar tap-tap of Nola's stilettos on hardwood. She moved through our Victorian home with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd rehearsed her entrance. At 34, Nola Varrow still turned heads at corporate mixers, her auburn hair always perfectly styled, her wardrobe carefully curated to project success and ambition. "Hey, babe," she called, dropping her designer purse by the door. "Sorry I'm so late. The Henderson account is turning into a nightmare." I held up the buzzing phone. "Someone named E is wondering if you're up." Her face went through a fascinating series of microexpressions: surprise, panic, calculation, then forced nonchalance. In my line of work, I'd learned to read people's tells when they were trying to cover up supply chain disasters or budget overruns. Nola's tell was touching her left earring when she lied. Her fingers went straight to her ear. "Oh, that's probably Emma from the Portland office. We've been coordinating candidate interviews across time zones." She reached for the phone, but I'd already set it back down. "Funny thing," I said, leaning against the counter with what I hoped looked like casual interest. "Your skirt's on backward." She glanced down, saw the zipper running up her front instead of her back, and her cheeks flushed. I changed in the office bathroom. The restaurant was freezing, and I needed something warmer for the client dinner. Must have been some dinner. What restaurant? That new place downtown. Meridian? You know, the one with the exposed brick walls. I nodded slowly. Meridian had closed 3 months ago for health code violations. The story had been all over the local business journal, the same publication Nola claimed to read religiously for recruiting insights. "Sounds nice," I said. "I'm heading to bed. Don't stay up too late with your projects." She kissed my cheek, her perfume different from what she'd worn that morning. "Just need to wrap up a few things on my laptop." I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, listening to her move around the kitchen below. The laptop she'd mentioned sat open on her desk in our shared home office, password protected but logged into her cloud storage. Nola had always been careless with digital security, leaving browsers open and files accessible. What I found in a folder labeled Work Confidential made my stomach drop. Email threads with someone named Ethan Bloom, project manager at her firm. Messages that started professional and gradually became personal, then intimate. Photos from company events where they stood closer than colleagues should. Hotel receipts for business trips where they'd booked adjoining rooms. And at the bottom of the folder, a video file dated last week. I clicked play and watched my wife and Ethan in what appeared to be a conference room after hours, the city lights twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows. They weren't discussing quarterly projections. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of our office, surrounded by the life we'd built together. Wedding photos on the bookshelf, the desk we'd assembled with much cursing and several leftover screws, the coffee-stained coaster from our honeymoon in Portland. Downstairs, I could hear Nola moving around, probably deleting messages and covering her tracks. My phone buzzed with a text from my old friend Roddy. "Drinks tomorrow? You sound like you need to hit something." I typed back, "Rain check. Just found tomorrow's project." The next morning, Nola left early for what she claimed was a breakfast meeting with potential candidates. I called in sick to work, the first time in 3 years, and spent the day doing what I did best, conducting a thorough audit. I started with finances. Our joint checking account showed regular charges to restaurants I'd never heard of, hotels in cities where Nola claimed to be working alone, and retail purchases that never made it home. She'd been careful, never spending enough to trigger my attention, but the pattern was clear once I knew what to look for. Next, I secured our assets. I transferred half our savings to an account she didn't know about, disabled her access to our joint credit cards, and scheduled appointments with both a divorce attorney and a financial advisor. If Nola wanted to play games with our marriage, she'd discover I was better at strategy than she'd given me credit for. The hardest part was installing the security cameras. I told myself they were for protection, evidence if things got ugly. But as I mounted the tiny devices in our living room and kitchen, I felt like I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. By evening, I'd transformed from a trusting husband into someone I barely recognized, calculating, suspicious, and coldly methodical. When Nola came home with another story about client emergencies and last-minute meetings, I smiled and nodded and asked about her day with genuine-sounding interest. "How's the Henderson account progressing?" I asked over dinner. She launched into an elaborate story about difficult candidates and picky clients, her left hand gesturing animatedly, while her right fingers worried her earring. I made appropriate noises of sympathy and support, while mentally cataloging every inconsistency. "Oh, by the way," she said, cutting into her salmon, "there's a company gala next Friday. Spouses are invited. I thought it might be fun to dress up and show you off to my colleagues." "Sounds great," I said. "I'd love to meet the people you work with." Especially Ethan, I thought, and her boss, Liam Dorsey, whose name had appeared in several of the email chains, as someone who understood the pressures of working closely with talented colleagues. That night, after Nola fell asleep, I sat in my basement workshop surrounded by the tools and half-finished projects that had always been my refuge. My father had taught me that every problem had a solution if you approached it with the right tools and enough patience. He'd been talking about fixing motorcycles and repairing furniture, but the principle applied to more complex problems too. I pulled out a legal pad and started making lists. What I knew, what I suspected, what I could prove. The people involved, their relationships, their vulnerabilities, the timeline of events, and the evidence I'd need to protect myself. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Project Audit Complete." By dawn, I had a plan. The Meridian Hotel ballroom buzzed with the forced energy of corporate networking events. Nola had spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing a black cocktail dress that cost more than my monthly car payment and shoes that could probably fund a small country's defense budget. She looked stunning, confident, and completely unaware that I'd spent the week preparing for this moment. "There's Liam," she said, squeezing my arm as we entered the ballroom. "My boss. I really want you two to meet." Liam Dorsey stood near the bar, a man in his early 40s with silver-touched hair and the kind of expensive suit that whispered rather than shouted. He had the bearing of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room, his pale eyes taking in everything while revealing nothing. "Liam, this is my husband Porter," Nola said, her voice bright with nervous energy. "Porter, this is Liam Dorsey, the best boss I've ever had." Liam's handshake was firm, his smile polite but measuring. "Porter, Nola's told me so much about you. Supply chain consulting, right? Fascinating work." "It has its moments," I said. "Mostly involves finding problems other people prefer to ignore." Something flickered in Liam's eyes. "How perceptive. That's exactly what good management requires, identifying issues before they become disasters." Nola laughed, but it sounded forced. "You two are going to get along great. I'm going to grab us some drinks." She hurried toward the bar, leaving me alone with her boss. Liam watched her go, then turned back to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Walk with me," he said quietly. We moved toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The ballroom chatter provided cover for private conversation, and Liam seemed to know exactly how to position us for maximum discretion. "Your wife is very talented," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Ambitious, driven. Sometimes that ambition can lead people to make questionable choices." I kept my expression bland. Nola's always been goal-oriented. Indeed, the question becomes, what happens when someone's goals conflict with company policy or personal ethics? Before I could respond, he continued, "Your wife is crossing lines at work, Porter, lines that put both her career and our company at risk." I forced myself to remain calm. "What kind of lines?" Liam glanced around the room, ensuring we weren't overheard. "The kind that involve inappropriate relationships with subordinates, misuse of company resources, behavior that, if it became public, would be devastating for everyone involved." "That's quite an accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's a fact." His pale eyes met mine. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before I could answer, Nola appeared at my elbow, slightly breathless and carrying 3 glasses of champagne. "What are you two talking about so seriously?" Liam accepted his glass with a slight smile. "I was just telling Porter how much we value loyalty at our company, both personal and professional." "That's my husband," Nola said, slipping her arm through mine. "Loyal to a fault." "That's my husband," she said, her voice rising slightly as she looked between us with growing alarm. Liam's expression didn't change, but his words cut through the ambient noise like a blade. Not for long. The conversation around us seemed to pause. Nearby colleagues turned to look, sensing drama but not understanding its source. Nola's face went pale, then flushed red as the implications of Liam's statement sank in. I set down my untouched champagne and looked at my wife. Really looked at her. The guilt written in every line of her face, the panic in her eyes, the way she unconsciously stepped back from both of us as if distance could somehow undo what had just been revealed. "Well," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "this has been illuminating." I turned to leave, but not before catching the eye of a server. "Excuse me, could you send a bottle of your most expensive champagne to this table? Put it on my tab." I gestured toward where Nola and Liam stood frozen. "For the happy couple." The words carried in the sudden quiet, and I saw heads turn, phones discreetly raised. In the age of social media, corporate drama traveled faster than wildfire. Nola started after me, her heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. "Porter, wait! You don't understand." I paused at the ballroom entrance and turned back to her. "Actually, I understand perfectly. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" As I walked toward the elevator, I heard her stilettos behind me, but I didn't slow down. In the reflection of the polished elevator doors, I could see her approaching, her face a mask of desperation and calculation. "Porter, please, let me explain." The elevator arrived, and I stepped inside. As the doors began to close, I looked at my wife, soon to be ex-wife, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. "Save it for HR," I said. The doors closed on her stricken face, and I rode down alone, already planning my next move. Outside the hotel, I sat in my car for several minutes, processing what had just happened. Liam's warning, the public confrontation, the way Nola's carefully constructed facade had crumbled in front of her colleagues. It was more than I'd hoped for, and exactly what I'd feared. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Cassie Dorsey, Liam's wife. We should talk. I know everything." I stared at the message, realizing the game was more complex than I'd understood. Liam wasn't just Nola's boss. He was a player in this drama, and apparently so was his wife. I typed back, "When and where?" Her response came immediately. "Tomorrow, Cafe Luna on 5th Street, 2 p.m. Come alone. As I drove home through the city streets, I passed the construction site where I'd worked summers during college, the blue-collar neighborhood where I'd grown up, the community college where I'd earned my business degree while working full-time. I'd built my life carefully, methodically, always playing by the rules. But rules, I was learning, were for people who weren't willing to fight dirty. At home, I found Nola's things scattered around our bedroom, jewelry on the dresser, clothes draped over chairs, the detritus of someone who'd left in a hurry that morning without expecting to return to a changed world. I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and sat in my workshop, surrounded by the tools and projects that represented the life I'd thought I was building. Tomorrow, I'd meet Cassie Dorsey and learn what she knew. Tonight, I'd plan my next move. The audit was just beginning. Café Luna occupied a corner spot on 5th Street, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood, the kind of place that served $15 sandwiches to people who wanted to feel authentic while spending corporate expense accounts. I arrived early, choosing a table with a clear view of both entrances and the street outside, old habits from my military father, who'd taught me to always know my exits. Cassie Dorsey walked in exactly at 2 p.m., and I understood immediately why Liam had married her. She moved with the confidence of someone born to wealth and power, her silver hair styled in an expensive cut, her clothes understated, but unmistakably high-end. She was maybe 45, with the kind of ageless beauty that came from excellent genetics and better health care. "Porter?" she asked, extending a manicured hand. "Cassie Dorsey. Thank you for meeting me." "Mrs. Dorsey, I have to admit I'm curious about this conversation." She ordered green tea and waited until the server left before speaking. "Please call me Cassie, and you should know that what I'm about to tell you stays between us, at least for now." I nodded, studying her face for tells. Unlike Nola, Cassie seemed incapable of deception, or perhaps she was simply too skilled at it for me to detect. "My husband told me about your conversation last night," she said. "He was impressed by how you handled yourself." I'm not sure handled is the right word. I felt like I was being ambushed. "You were, but not by Liam." She leaned forward slightly. "Porter, your wife and Ethan Bloom have been conducting an affair for 6 months, but that's not the worst of it." My stomach clenched, but I kept my expression neutral. "Go on." "They've been using company resources to fund their relationship. Hotel rooms charged to fake client meetings, dinners billed as business expenses, travel costs for conferences that never happened." She pulled out a tablet and showed me a spreadsheet. "We're talking about nearly $30,000 in fraudulent charges." I stared at the numbers, feeling sick. "How do you know all this?" "Because I'm the HR director, Porter. I've been building this case for 2 months, waiting for the right moment to act." She met my eyes. "Last night provided that moment." "Why are you telling me this?" Cassie smiled, but it wasn't entirely pleasant. "Because Liam and I have been married for 15 years, and I know when my husband is being manipulated. Your wife is very good at reading people, identifying their weaknesses and exploiting them. She saw Liam's ambition and convinced him that her relationship with Ethan was just office gossip. But you knew better. I always know better. It's my job." She swiped to another screen on her tablet. "Email records, hotel surveillance footage, credit card receipts. Your wife and Mr. Bloom have been remarkably careless." I studied the evidence, my anger building with each document. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to help me destroy them professionally while protecting yourself personally." She leaned back in her chair. "Liam is a good man, but he's been played. Your wife made him believe that any action against her would look like retaliation for rejecting his advances. Did he make advances?" "Of course not, but she's been setting up that narrative for weeks, just in case. She's smarter than we gave her credit for." Cassie's expression hardened. "But not smart enough." "What's your plan?" She smiled, and this time it was genuinely predatory. We let them hang themselves. I've scheduled a formal HR review for Monday morning. By then, I'll have complete documentation of their fraudulent activities. The company will have no choice but to terminate them both and pursue criminal charges. Criminal charges? Embezzlement, Porter. $30,000 in fraudulent charges, falsified expense reports, misuse of corporate resources. Your wife isn't just cheating on you, she's stealing from her employer. I sat back, processing the implications. Where do I fit into this? You file for divorce immediately, citing irreconcilable differences. No mention of adultery. No public accusations. You protect your reputation and your assets while we handle the professional consequences. She slid a business card across the table. This is my personal attorney. She's expecting your call. And Ethan? Mr. Bloom is about to discover that actions have consequences. He's 28 years old, thinks he's untouchable because he's good-looking and charming. He's about to learn otherwise. I pocketed the business card, my mind already working through the logistics. What about Nola? She's not going to go quietly. She doesn't have a choice. By Monday afternoon, she'll be unemployed, facing potential criminal charges and dealing with a divorce. She'll be too busy trying to save herself to cause you problems. This seems almost too easy. Cassie's smile faded. Porter, what your wife did to you is unforgivable. But what she did to my husband, manipulating him, using his position to cover her crimes, setting him up to take the fall if things went wrong, that's something I take personally. So this is revenge. This is justice. There's a difference. She finished her tea and stood. Call the attorney today. File the papers tomorrow. By Monday, this will all be over. As she walked away, I remained at the table, staring at the business card and thinking about the woman I'd married. Nola had always been ambitious, but I'd seen that as a positive trait. I'd never imagined she was capable of this level of deception and manipulation. My phone buzzed with a text from Roddy. Heard about last night. You okay? I typed back. Getting better. Want to help me with a project? Always. What do you need? Meet me at my place tonight. Bring your truck. That evening, Roddy arrived with beer and the kind of practical wisdom that came from 20 years of friendship. He'd been my roommate in college, my best man at the wedding, and the one person who'd never been impressed by Nola's charm. So, he said, settling into my workshop with a beer, want to tell me what's really going on? I laid out everything, the affair, the embezzlement, the confrontation at the gala, my meeting with Cassie. Roddy listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Jesus, Porter. I knew she was ambitious, but this... He shook his head. What do you need from me? Help moving my stuff out this weekend. I'm going to stay at the extended stay until I find an apartment. I handed him a list. Also, I need you to witness something. What kind of something? I'm going to confront Ethan. Nothing illegal, nothing violent, but I want a witness in case he tries to claim otherwise. Roddy grinned, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him all evening. Now you're talking my language. We spent the next hour planning, and for the first time since discovering Nola's betrayal, I felt like I was regaining control. The audit was expanding beyond simple fact-finding. It was becoming something more comprehensive, more final. By Sunday night, I'd be ready for whatever came next. Ethan Bloom lived in a converted warehouse in the Arts District, the kind of trendy loft that screamed, successful millennial with more money than sense. I'd done my research over the weekend, social media profiles, property records, even his gym schedule. The man documented his life obsessively, making surveillance embarrassingly easy. Monday morning, while Nola was presumably dealing with Cassie's HR investigation, I positioned myself in the parking garage beneath Ethan's building. Roddy waited in his truck near the exit, ready to provide backup if things went sideways. At 7:45 a.m., exactly on schedule, Ethan emerged from the elevator wearing workout gear and carrying a protein shake. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 28, with the kind of carefully maintained physique that suggested more gym time than actual physical work. His dark hair was styled with product, his smile confident and entitled. "Ethan Bloom," I called out, stepping from behind a concrete pillar. He turned, confused, but not yet alarmed. "Yeah? Do I know you?" "Porter Kellor, Nola's husband." The protein shake slipped from his fingers, splattering against the concrete. His face went through the same sequence of expressions I'd seen on Nola's: surprise, panic, calculation. "Look, man, I don't know what you think. I think you've been sleeping with my wife for 6 months. I think you've been stealing from your company to fund your relationship. I think you're about to have a very bad day." Ethan glanced around the empty garage, probably looking for security cameras or witnesses. "You can't prove anything." I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the photos from Nola's laptop. "Hotel receipts, email threads, surveillance footage from your office building. Cassie Dorsey has everything, Ethan. Right now, she's probably explaining to HR how you and Nola embezzled $30,000. His face went pale. We didn't embezzle anything. Those were legitimate business expenses." "For conferences that never happened? Client dinners at restaurants that were closed? Come on, Ethan, you're smarter than that." He started backing toward his car, a silver BMW that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something very clearly." I stepped closer, not threatening but definitely invading his personal space. "My wife made her choice. You made yours. Now you both get to live with the consequences." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining reality. By noon today, you'll be unemployed. By next week, you'll probably be facing criminal charges. Your name is going to be all over the local business journals as the project manager who threw away his career for a married woman." Ethan's back hit his car, and I saw real fear in his eyes for the first time. "Look, Porter, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. Nola said you two were having problems, that you were practically separated." "Stop." I held up a hand. "I don't want to hear your justifications or excuses. I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say." I leaned closer, close enough that he could see I wasn't bluffing. "If you contact my wife again, if you try to drag me into your legal problems, if you even mention my name to anyone involved in this mess, I will make your life significantly worse. Do you understand?" "You can't." "I can do whatever I want, Ethan. I'm the wronged party here. I'm the victim of your crimes. If I decide to pursue civil action for alienation of affection, or if I choose to be very vocal about what you and Nola did to me, who do you think people will believe? The betrayed husband or the pretty boy who seduced a married woman?" He stared at me, probably trying to calculate his options. "What do you want me to do?" "Disappear. Take whatever consequences are coming and disappear from my life completely. Find another city, another job, another woman to manipulate. Just make sure it's nowhere near me or mine." I stepped back, giving him space to breathe. "Oh, and Ethan? Next time you decide to have an affair with a married woman, maybe choose one who isn't stupid enough to document everything on her laptop." As I walked away, I heard him fumbling with his car keys, probably already planning his escape. By the time I reached Roddy's truck, Ethan was speeding toward the garage exit like his life depended on it. "How'd it go?" Roddy asked as I climbed into the passenger seat. "Better than expected. I think he got the message." "Think he'll cause problems?" "Not if he's smart. And if he's not smart, well..." I shrugged. "Cassie Dorsey has enough evidence to bury him completely." My phone buzzed with a text from the divorce attorney. "Papers filed. Your wife has been served at her office. Expect contact within 24 hours. Another message, this one from Cassie. "HR meeting concluded. Both subjects terminated effective immediately. Criminal referral in progress. Thank you for your cooperation." I showed the messages to Roddy, who whistled low. "Damn, Porter. When you audit something, you really audit it. The job's not finished yet. What's left? I thought about Nola, probably sitting in her car outside the office building right now, her career destroyed, her relationship with Ethan exposed, divorce papers in her hand. She'd call soon, probably with tears and apologies and promises to change. Now comes the hard part, I said. Now I have to face my wife. The call came at 2:17 p.m. while I was in a meeting with my own HR department, explaining why I'd need to update my emergency contacts and insurance beneficiaries. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to Nola's voice crack as she begged me to come home so we could talk. I deleted the message and went back to work. She called 6 more times that afternoon, each message more desperate than the last. By evening, she'd progressed from begging to anger to bargaining and back to begging. I saved them all, evidence for the divorce proceedings, but I didn't respond. At 9 p.m. I drove to our house, my house now according to the legal papers, to collect the last of my belongings. I'd moved most of my important items over the weekend, but there were still books and tools and photographs I wanted to retrieve. Nola's car was in the driveway. I sat in my truck for a moment, gathering my resolve. This was the confrontation I'd been avoiding, the final scene in a marriage that had faded the moment I found that video on her laptop. The front door opened before I could knock, and Nola appeared in the doorway looking like she'd aged 5 years in 5 days. Her hair was unwashed, her makeup smeared, her expensive clothes wrinkled and stained. "Porter," she whispered, "thank God. I thought you weren't coming." "I'm here for my books," I said, stepping past her into the house. "And my tools from the basement. We need to talk." "No, we don't." She followed me to the basement, her bare feet silent on the stairs. "Porter, please, let me explain what happened." I started packing my toolbox, each implement wrapped carefully and placed in its designated spot. "There's nothing to explain, Nola. I know what happened. The question is why." It wasn't supposed to mean anything. Ethan was he was young and charming, and he made me feel special, but it didn't mean anything. I looked up from my tools. $30,000 in fraudulent charges didn't mean anything. 6 months of lies didn't mean anything. Setting up your boss to take the fall for your crimes didn't mean anything. Her face crumpled. "How do you know about the money?" "Because unlike you, I'm actually good at my job. When I audit something, I find everything. I can pay it back. I have savings, jewelry I can sell." "It's too late for that." I closed the toolbox and hefted it toward the stairs. "The company filed criminal charges this morning. You're going to need a lawyer, not a payment plan." She grabbed my arm as I reached the top of the stairs. "Porter, I love you. I know I screwed up, but I love you. We can fix this." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then at her face. "Do you know what the worst part is, Nola? It's not the affair. It's not even the money." "What is it?" "It's that you're still lying. Even now, even after losing everything, you're still trying to manipulate me." I gently removed her hand. "You don't love me. You love what I represented. Stability, respectability, someone to fall back on when your schemes collapsed." "That's not true." "Prove it. Tell me one thing about this situation that's actually true." She opened her mouth, then closed it, tears streaming down her face. "That's what I thought." I picked up my toolbox and headed for the door. "Your lawyer will be in touch about the divorce settlement. Don't contact me directly." "Porter, please." I paused at the door, looking back at the woman I'd married 7 years ago. "You know what's funny, Nola? I actually might have forgiven the affair. People make mistakes, marriages go through rough patches, but the stealing, the lying, the way you tried to destroy other people to cover your tracks, that's not a mistake. That's who you really are." I left her standing in our front hallway, sobbing into her hands, and drove away from the life we'd built together. The audit was complete. 6 weeks later, I sat in Cassie Dorsey's law office, signing the final divorce papers. The process had been surprisingly smooth. Nola's criminal attorney had advised her to accept my terms rather than risk a contested divorce while facing embezzlement charges. "That's the last of it," Cassie said, notarizing my signature. "Congratulations, Porter. You're officially a free man. How are the criminal proceedings going?" Nola pled guilty to a reduced charge last week, 18 months probation, full restitution, and community service. She'll avoid jail time, but her career in corporate recruiting is over. And Ethan? Took a plea deal and moved to Phoenix. Apparently, he's selling insurance now. Cassie smiled grimly. Amazing how quickly someone's life can change when their choices catch up with them. I gathered the papers and stood to leave. What about Liam? How's he handling all this? Better than expected. The board conducted a full review of his management practices and found no wrongdoing. If anything, his reputation has been enhanced by how professionally he handled the situation. She paused. He asked me to thank you for your discretion throughout this process. I just wanted it to be over. And now it is. Outside the law office, I walked through downtown toward the construction site where I'd started working part-time on weekends. Physical labor felt good after months of legal meetings and paperwork. It reminded me of who I'd been before Nola, who I could be again. My phone buzzed with a text from Roddy. "Drinks tonight to celebrate your freedom?" I typed back, "Can't. Have a date." It was true. Sarah Chen, the project manager on the construction site, had asked me to dinner after weeks of what could generously be called flirtation. She was smart, funny, and refreshingly direct, everything Nola had pretended to be. As I walked home to my new apartment, I passed the Meridian Hotel where this whole mess had started. The ballroom where Liam had delivered his devastating revelation, where Nola's carefully constructed life had begun to crumble, where I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge was simply letting people face the consequences of their own actions. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Porter, it's Nola." I stopped walking. "You're not supposed to contact me directly." "I know, I wanted you to know that I'm sorry, really sorry, not for getting caught, but for what I did to you, to us." I stood on the sidewalk, people flowing around me like water around a stone. "Okay? That's it? Just okay?" "What do you want me to say, Nola? That I forgive you? That I understand? That we can be friends?" "I don't know. Something." I thought about the woman I'd married, the life we'd planned, the future that had faded in a corporate conference room captured on a smartphone video. "I hope you figure out who you want to be, Nola. I really do. But I can't be part of that process." "Porter, goodbye, Nola." I hung up and blocked the number. That evening, I met Sarah at a small Italian restaurant near the waterfront. She wore jeans and a sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup except lipstick. She looked real in a way that Nola never had. "So," she said over wine, "tell me about yourself. The real story, not the construction site small talk." "Recently divorced. Turned out my wife was embezzling money to fund an affair with a coworker. I helped expose them both and watched their lives implode." I took a sip of wine. "Your turn." Sarah laughed, a genuine sound that made me smile. "Jesus, Porter, most people start with their favorite movies or childhood pets. I'm not most people." "No, you're not." She studied my face. "Are you okay? With all of it, I mean?" I considered the question seriously. "I think so. For the first time in months, I feel like myself again. Like I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not." "That's good. Pretending is exhausting." We talked for 3 hours, about work and books and travel and the small disappointments that shaped people's lives. She was divorced too, from a husband who'd decided marriage was incompatible with his dream of becoming a professional poker player. We compared war stories and found ourselves laughing at situations that had once seemed tragic. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said as we walked along the waterfront after dinner. "Sure." Do you think you'll ever trust someone completely again? I thought about it. I don't know, but I think I'm ready to try. She smiled and took my hand. That's a start. 3 months later, Roddy helped me move into a house in Sarah's neighborhood. It was smaller than the Victorian I'd shared with Nola, but it felt more like home than anywhere I'd lived in years. You know what's funny? Roddy said as we carried my workbench into the basement. You seem happier now than you did when you were married. I am happier. Even after everything that happened? I thought about the question while we positioned the workbench against the far wall. Especially after everything that happened. I know who I am now. I know what I won't tolerate. I know the difference between love and manipulation. And Sarah? Sarah is real. What you see is what you get. No games, no hidden agendas, no secret phones with mysterious messages. Think it'll last? I hope so. But if it doesn't, I'll survive. I've got good friends, work I enjoy, and a basement full of tools. I grinned at him. Plus, I'm really good at conducting audits now. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a letter from Nola's attorney. She was moving to Seattle, starting over with a new job in a different field. The letter included a check for half the amount she'd stolen from her company. Apparently, her restitution payments were ahead of schedule. I deposited the check and used the money to buy an engagement ring. Sarah said yes on a Saturday morning in my workshop, surrounded by the tools and projects that represented the life I'd built from the ashes of my marriage. She cried when I told her the whole story of the ring, how it came from the wreckage of my first marriage, but represented hope for something better. Are you sure you want to try this again? She asked, holding up her hand to admire the diamond. I'm sure I want to try it with you. Even knowing how badly it can go wrong? Especially knowing that. I know what to look for now. I know the warning signs, the red flags, the difference between love and performance. She kissed me then, and I tasted salt from her tears and sweetness from her coffee, and something else that I finally recognized as genuine happiness. A year later, we were married in a small ceremony attended by family and close friends. Liam and Cassie Dorsey came, which surprised me until Cassie explained that they considered me family now, someone who'd helped them weather their own crisis and emerge stronger. You know, Liam said during the reception, I never properly thanked you for how you handled that situation with Nola. You don't need to thank me. I was just protecting myself. No, it was more than that. You could have made things very ugly, very public. You could have tried to drag me down with them. Instead, you took the high road. I took the smart road. There's a difference. He laughed. Fair enough. But still, thank you. As the evening wound down, I found myself standing on the deck of the restaurant, looking out over the water with Sarah beside me. She was talking to Cassie about work, their voices mixing with the sound of waves and distant music. Penny for your thoughts, Sarah said, slipping her arm through mine. Just thinking about how different things are now, how different I am. Better different? Much better different. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, my old paranoia flared. Was Nola trying to contact me again? But the message was from a colleague, congratulating me on the wedding and asking about a consulting project. I showed Sarah the message, and she smiled. See? Nothing to worry about. Old habits. Good habits. Being careful isn't the same as being paranoid. As we drove home from the reception, I thought about the audit I'd conducted 2 years ago, how it had started as a simple investigation into my wife's suspicious behavior and evolved into a complete restructuring of my life. I'd lost a marriage, but gained clarity. I'd lost trust, but learned discernment. I'd lost the future I'd planned, but found a better one. Porter? Sarah said as we pulled in.